Everyone in crypto says they want decentralization. Every white paper mentions it, every founder claims it, every community believes they're actually part of it. But here's actually the uncomfortable truth. Most of what we call decentralized today isn't actually decentralized at all. In fact, the word has been stretched so thin, so abused, and so strategically marketed that most people, decentralization no longer means anything real. It's become a vibe, a branding tool, a psychological shield against criticism. And actually, the scary part of this is that the more constantly a project screams, we're decentralized, the more likely is that something actually important is being hidden behind that word. This video isn't about hating decentralization, but it is actually about rescuing it. Because decentralization was never meant to be a slogan, it was meant to be a constraint, a hard trade off, something expensive, uncomfortable, and sometimes inefficient. And if we don't actually understand what decentralization actually does in practice, not in theory, not in marketing, but in the real world, we end up supporting systems that are worse than the centralized ones they actually claim to replace. So today we're going to talk about the myth of decentralization, how it started as crypto's DNA, how it got corrupted, which forms actually matter, and which one are pure buzzwords. When decentralization actively hurts growth, and finally how you as a user, investor, or builder can tell the real thing from the fake decentralization. No maximalism, no buzzwords, just clear thinking. So let's start at the beginning. So decentralization didn't start as a marketing concept. It started as a response to failure. Bitcoin wasn't created because people hated banks for fun. It was created because trust-based systems kept breaking. Financial crises, bailouts, censorship, permission access, gatekeepers deciding who gets to participate and who doesn't. Satoshi insight wasn't to let's decentralize everything. It was much more specific. Remove single point of failure, remove single point of control, and remove the need to trust any one actor. Trustless. That's it. Early crypto understood this very clearly. Decentralization wasn't a philosophical goal, it was a defensive mechanism. Bitcoin didn't decentralize for aesthetics. It decentralized because if one miner, one company, or one government could shut it down, the system fails its purpose. And for a long time, decentralization had teeth. If you ran node, you mattered. If you mine, you participate. If you fork, you exercise sovereignty. And then something changed. As crypto grew, decentralization slowly shifted from a design constraint into a branding layer. Instead of asking what must be decentralized for this system to, survive, projects started asking what could we call decentralized without slowing growth. And once that mindset shift happens, the corruption began. Token launch with centralized foundation controlling upgrades, DAO form where 90% of voting power sat with insiders. Community governance existed on paper while real decision happened in private Discord calls. So all of this becomes something that you could claim by default as decentralization, not something you had to earn. And the word itself becomes emotionally loaded. If you question project decentralization, you weren't being analytical. You're being labeled negative, anti-crypto, or not aligned with the vision. So decentralization stops being examined. It becomes assumed. And when words become assumed, it kind of loses its power. Today when someone says this project is decentralized, you should feel the same instinct as when a food package says all natural. Okay, but how is it all natural? Where does it get the food from? And compared to what food that means all natural means. So because decentralization without specifics is just noise. And here's the key thing most people miss. Decentralization is not one thing. It's not a binary switch where something is either decentralized or not. It's a collection of very specific properties, and some of them matters far more than others, and it exists in a spectrum. The most important one is obviously control over state changes. Who decided when the rules change? If a small group can upgrade contracts, pause the system, reverse transactions, or change monetary parameters, then the system is not meaningfully decentralized, regardless of how many nodes it has or how many wallet hold the token, etc. This is why governance decentralization matters more than cosmetic decentralization. You can have 10,000 nodes. You can have millions of token holders. But if upgrades are decided by 5 people with admin keys, decentralization is mostly performative, right? Another form that truly matters is censorship resistance. Can the system continue operating even if powerful actors want it stopped? And this is where decentralization actually protects users. If validators are geographically distributed, if infrastructure isn't reliant on a single cloud provider, if no legal entities can be pressured into flipping a switch, then decentralization is doing the real work. And then there's economic decentralization, who actually captures the value. If early insiders, venture capitals or foundation control the majority of the supply and emissions, then incentives become skewed. Decision optimized for the token price management and optics, and not for users. Economic concentration eventually leads to political concentration. Always. And finally, there's exit decentralization, which almost no one actually talks about. Can user leave without asking permission? Can they fork the code, migrate liquidity, or rebuild elsewhere if governance fail? This is one of the most crypto underrated powers: the ability to exit peacefully instead of begging for reform. You just can fork the code, right? If a system makes exit practically impossible, say non-open source code, decentralization on paper doesn't save you. Now compare this to the type of decentralization that gets marketed the most. UI decentralization using IPFS, token count decentralization, whatever, DAO theater, community-owned slogans. These things looks good on slides, but they don't protect users when things go wrong. And decentralization only proves its value when things actually go wrong, right? Because otherwise, it's a quite inefficient system. So here's where the conversation gets a bit uncomfortable. Okay, decentralization is not free. It introduces friction, it slows coordination, it complicates decision making, and it increases costs. And pretending otherwise is just dishonest. In early stages of a project, excessive decentralization can actively kill momentum. Imagine trying to ship a product when every parameter change requires a vote, quorum, and delay. Imagine responding to a critical bug while waiting for governance approval. Imagine onboarding new users while explaining like 12 layers of consensus. This is why many successful systems start centralized, and even Bitcoin starts centralized, right? And that's not evil. Centralization is efficient, it's fast, it's responsive, it's how startups survive. The problem begins when temporary centralization quietly becomes permanent. When teams promise decentralization later but never define what later means, when the roadmaps keep shifting, when control is retained in the name of protecting users but never relinquished when users are protected. Decentralization becomes detrimental when it's applied dogmatically instead of surgically. Not everything needs to be decentralized, okay? Your front end doesn't really need one, in my opinion. Your customer support doesn't really need one. Your branding decision probably don't, but monetary policy matters more. Custody matters more. Settlement finality matters more. The tragedy is that many projects decentralize the wrong layer and centralize the dangerous one. Focusing on less important stuff compared to the more important stuff. They decentralize governance theater while centralizing control. They decentralize responsibility while centralizing power. And then they wonder why users lose trust. Decentralization isn't about making system messy, guys. It's about making them resilient to the attacks from outside. If decentralization doesn't increase resilience, it's probably just decorative then. So how do you actually tell the difference, between the real decentralization and the fake one? Not by reading slogans, not by counting DAO proposal, not by listening to Twitter spaces. You look at constraints. Who can break the system if they wanted to? Who can pause it? Who can upgrade it? Who can censor it? Who can capture value disproportionately? And follow the keys, follow the supply, and follow the legal entities. If a foundation controls the treasury, upgrades, and narratives, that's a centralized choke point. Even if it claims to represent the community. If governance participation is low, outcomes are predictable. Decentralization is honestly cosmetic. If validators are technically permissionless but practically gated by hardware costs, relationship or off-chain coordination, decentralization exists only in theory. Real decentralization feels boring. It's slow, it's messy, it's resistant to marketing narrative, and it actually often frustrates founders, which is exactly why it matters. If something feels too smooth, too coordinated, too controlled, you kind of need to ask yourself, is it decentralized? So here's how you protect yourself. Stop asking, is this decentralized? Or start asking, decentralized from whom? From the founders, from the government, from insiders, or from infrastructure providers that ask what happens if this fails? Who pays the cost? Who absorbs the damage? Who walks away? Read governance documents, not tweets. Look at token distributions, not market caps. Watch behavior during crisis, not bull markets. Bull market hide centralization. Crisis expose it. And most importantly, be okay with nuance. Some centralization is actually acceptable. Some decentralization is more harmful. We can see that from Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, where Ethereum Classic focused more on decentralization, and look what happened to the price, right? Compared to the Ethereum, the top two cryptocurrency. And purity test helps no one actually. So crypto doesn't really need to be more ideological. It actually needs to be more honest. Decentralization as a responsibility is not negotiable. And decentralization was never meant to make us to feel like it is one of the best coins in the world. So stay safe, guys, and make sure always do your own research. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.